Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome or welcome back, as the case may be. This is session number 3 in our 4-part Entering the World of E-commerce series. Today, we are focused on social media marketing. It's going to be a fun session. We have a great guest speaker who's going to be walking you through all the ins and outs of building an online presence, what the difference between different social media platforms might mean for your business, maybe where you should target your time and your dollars. And just a couple little housekeeping things out of the way at the top of the hour here, as usual. Again, my name is Kristen Cordero. I'm the Deputy Director of Business Services here at the Rhode Island Department of State under Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea. I will not be speaking again today, so I'm just your intro person. If you would like to use closed captioning for today's session, you can go ahead and do so. You click the little button that says CC on either the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on which device you're using. And then you can configure the parameters to work how you most like it to. We are recording this session. We've recorded all the sessions as we have gone through this series. Early next week, I'm figuring Tuesday, maybe, by the time everything gets all optimized and ready to go, you will get an email with a copy of the recordings of all 4 sessions and a copy of any presentation materials that our presenters have used. So you will be getting copies of everything. Never fear, we will make sure you get taken care of. That's all I have for intro. I'm going to turn the virtual microphone over to Jeff, and Jeff is a fantastic partner of ours. He is a SCORE volunteer and just a jack of all trades, expert at everything. Probably not supposed to say expert, but a wonderful person to talk to all around. And I will turn it over to Jeff. Take it away, Jeff.
Oh, thanks, Kristen. That was an excellent introduction to the my presentation, because that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. I'm not so sure that introducing me as an expert in everything was as good an introduction, but thank you for the compliment. I am the co-chair of the Rhode Island SCORE Association. Some of you probably know that we are a all-volunteer organization associated with the Small Business Administration and various other organizations, and we do several things, but the main thing we do is help out small businesses and startups through mentoring. And you were always happy to help. You can go to score.ri, learn more about us, and sign up for a mentoring session if you'd like to, always at no charge. So as Kristen said, I'm going to talk about social media marketing for your small business, and with a couple of caveats. First of all, so as important as social media marketing is, it's only one component of your online presence. And I want to be able to give you a sense of how you should prioritize social media versus some of the other options that are available to you, make you aware of what those other options are, so that you can make an informed choice. And then we'll dive more in more detail in the social media area. The other thing is, I'll be very frank, I've got more material here than we can possibly cover in an hour. So what I'm going to do is, on some slides, I'm just going to cover some highlights. But as Kristen said, you're going to get a copy of those slides. If there's things that you're interested in them, you can go back and look at the slides. And of course, you can always reach out to me at SCORE if I can be of further. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And what I'm going to do today is cover 5 different areas. First, we're going to talk about something you really must do before you start spending a lot of money on social media. Then we're going to talk about this whole thing, as I mentioned, should you focus on social media or other forms of digital marketing, such as search engines? Then we'll get into the different platforms that are available, the target audiences, things like that, some best practices. And then a question I get asked a lot is, should I do it myself or hire an outside firm? So I'm actually going to spend a few minutes actually talking about that. All these things, by the way, I want to be very clear, are not like something I can say, well, for everybody, you should always do this. It always depends on what your business is, how mature you are, what industry you're in, et cetera. And I'll try to reflect on that in this presentation. So the first thing I mentioned is, what should you do first? And I like this quote that, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And so it's so important before we dive into social media to know what our marketing strategy is. We should have a marketing strategy in place that will help us get to where we want to go. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. And this will reflect sort of an exercise I do with a lot of people who we mentor at SCORE in this area. So in the social media and all online, one of the wonderful things about it from the standpoint of a company or a business that's trying to do outreach is there's this great ability to target customers based on a whole wide range of different criteria. So you could, for instance, you could specifically go after people in age groups, or men versus women, or where they work, or what their specific points in life are, those sorts of things. Even things like income and that sort of thing. So it's really important that you understand who is that your target customers are that you're trying to reach. So what we do is we kind of break it into, what I do is when I'm working with people is work with them and to create sort of a focus on target customers, the differentiation, and the message. So here, this would be, first we'll talk about conceptually, then I'll show you a quick example. Target customers, you could think of as sort of outside in. In other words, you're not looking so much at yourself, you're looking at your audience to find who they are and who it is that you want to be able to reach. Then you also want to think kind of inside out. What's really different about me? How am I different? How's my business different than all the dozens of different options that people have out there to take advantage of? And that's really important. It's oftentimes one of the hardest things people do is understanding in the customer's eyes, not just in your own eyes, but in the customer's eyes, the target customers, what's really different about the business that's important to them. And then you combine those things together to come up with your offering and message. And by the way, a lot of people start with the offering message, and that's not really what you want to do. You want to think about your target customers and differentiation, and then how that actually impacts your offering and message. And by the way, one of the phrases we sometimes use in marketing is you want to think of the offering and message as the job you do for your customers. What is the customer want done that you're offering them? It could be something, they may want a refreshment in the morning. They may want something that they can grab on the way home from work because they're hungry, right? It doesn't, when a job can be anything, but think of it in terms of not just the product or the service, but what it is that you're bringing to the customer. Because this is a pretty intense topic and so important, we actually have on our SCORE website a marketing strategy for small businesses web seminar. I've included the link, and when you get the slides from Kristen early next week, you'll be able to access that. If you want to listen, if you want to go through the process and think about how you would do this for yourself. Let me give you one example, though, of what this might look like. So this is a customer. It's the woman who runs a solar solar cell sales for the top of your home. And by the way, I would not usually share something like this because we would be in a SCORE mentoring session. It would be between the client and the mentor, but she has offered to make this public. So what we do, and if you think about it, solar cells is pretty much of a commodity type business. There's a lot of similarity, very little difference from company to company. So thinking about target customers and differentiation is kind of a challenging process. But first, we put together a list of her attributes of their target customers, their age group, the fact that they're residential homeowners, that sort of thing. And then we get in and understand her differentiation. And notice here that the differentiation wasn't so much about the solar cells, it was about what she personally brings to it, which is a natural educator, a personal connection with more interaction. And that's where this sort of solar RN, the nurse thing, comes in. And then based on that, the offering and the message. And by the way, it doesn't have to be just one target customer group. There's often more than one. Here she's actually gone and created one group for people who are not retired, a second group for people who are retired or partially retired, and then a third group is sort of more environmentally focused. And you'll notice for each of them, she's thought about how what she has to offer is different and what the message is, because the message might be slightly different. And this becomes the foundation of her, became the foundation of her social media outreach. So think about it. She now knows who her customers are that she's trying to, her target audience that she's trying to reach, and she's defined them in a very good way that she can actually apply on any social media platform. She's thought carefully about how she wants to differentiate herself. And then she's thought about there's these different groups, each of which would have a slightly different message, and therefore how she might want to message different to different groups. And that's really the kind of foundation that's so important to the next step, which is actually getting into the social media. And I'll be frank, a step that a lot of people don't do before they start thinking about their social media. And I would say that's something that should be done right up front. Oh, by the way, and this is called, when you get into multiple target audience, that's sometimes called buyer personas. Let me pause for a second. Kristen, any questions before we move on to our next step?
None at the moment.
Okay, we're good. All right, so now having put that foundation in place, as I mentioned, there's a lot of digital media opportunities out there, and I'd like to talk about how you might think about where to focus on for your business. So first of all, let me just point out that there is just a wide range of digital marketing, probably, in the 24 different areas kinds of range. So social media and various forms of social media being only one of them. And you should really think about where you want to put your efforts. Every company I've worked for, and some of them, of course, much larger than the average small business, still didn't have enough resources to do everything that they wanted to do. So it's an important part of any marketing is to think about where you want to focus. So I'm going to talk about the trade-offs in one specific area today, and that is search engine, or actually two, I should say, search engine versus social media, and organic versus paid. So search engine is things like Google, and YouTube is actually sort of a, Bing. So YouTube is actually sort of a search engine as well. Social media platforms, you know what those are: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. So one versus the other, we'll talk about those. And then organic is when you're just putting things out there without promoting them, without paying for them. Whereas paid is where sort of like paid advertising, think of it as just advertising basically, but you're advertising online. And you have organic with the search engine, and you have paid with the search engine. You have organic with social media and paid with social media. So we'll talk about the trade-offs in each area. And you can almost think of this, if you want, as kind of like you have a pile of chips. you don't want to necessarily put the same amount of chips on each pile. You want to think about where you should focus your efforts. And I'm going to help you do that right now. We'll talk a little bit about the search engine stuff, and then we'll get more into the social media. So I would suggest that one of the big choices on the search engine social media is sort of a transactional versus brand building kind of activities. When people go to a search engine, they're usually looking to make a transaction. By the way, all these statements are not meant to be black or white, right? There's shades of gray in all these things, but this is just sort of a general point, is that people are looking to maybe do something or buy something when they go to search engine. Whereas with social media, it's more aspirational. They're more looking to learn about something. They're more something that they're interested, et cetera. So let me give you an idea of some industries, some markets that you might be in that might be more beneficial to be in the search engine versus, and then we'll do the social media. So examples in transactional. If you were selling legal services, medical services, spare parts, repair parts, financial services, things like that. If somebody needs a spare part, they're not out there usually following various spare part manufacturers in social media. They have a problem. They need a spare part. They go out and they're looking for a way to fill that need as quickly as possible. Examples of industries that are maybe better suited to brand building might be fashion, arts and crafts, sports, lifestyle, home goods, learning opportunities, hobbies. These are things that people just want to learn about generally, and they're going to follow various social media kinds of things. Again, not saying that you can't do some brand building if you're, for instance, in the financial services, just saying that you want to make sure that you've really put a lot of effort into making sure that you're getting good results on your search engines, and the other way around for social media. By the way, in one area I can think of, clothing, you might find that men tend to be more transactional. I'm not saying everybody, but if I might decide on a Friday night that, geez, I'm going to an important thing on Saturday and I need a new tie or something like that. I'm going to quickly look for something. Whereas women may be more focused on thinking about a wardrobe over more time. So somebody who's selling women's clothing might be more focused on brand building. Again, none of these are black or white, but they're just the kinds of things to think about in one versus the other. Now let's talk about organic versus paid. And with the organic, it's very two distinct areas. And I've used an example, sort of Pinterest versus Instagram, but you could apply in pretty much across the board. With organic, they discover you. With paid, you're trying to find them. So it's a faster path to purchase. The cost is fairly modest with organic, but you're paying, it's paid advertising after all. So you're usually paying per click, and you might also be paying for some help in making it work, because with organic, the skills are pretty straightforward, whereas with paid, they're a little more specialized, so you might need some help. There's also, when you do it organically, there's usually a bigger time commitment. You can imagine if you're posting all the time, or even setting up one time, doing a post for the whole week, or a series of posts for the whole week, you're putting a fair number of hours. With paid, usually you can set it up, and then once you set it up, then there's only just a little bit of tuning. The time to results can be substantially different, though. With the organic, it may take months, even in under best case, to get the results you're looking for. Whereas with paid, because you're paying for it, you're getting in front of people, you're getting to a wider audience much more quickly. the results can start to come back in a much quicker result. The other difference is you get with organic, you get a little bit of data and a little bit of ability to target. That is, you have a little bit of sense of who's out there, who's following you. You can get some metrics about them. But if you're doing paid, you're getting a lot of detailed information and analytics that will tell you about the audience, who's clicking, who's seeing your ads, that sort of thing. So there's a choice there between those two different approaches. Let me talk, and by the way, when I said targeting, this is just some examples of various types of targeting you can do. I kind of referenced this earlier on. Let me mention one that I did not talk about, when that's a very interesting one, is called retargeting. And you may have experienced this where you go to somebody's website and then you start seeing ads for their products all over the place. That's called retargeting. So you can actually target people based on whether they've been to your website. But there's an even more interesting thing called similar audience retargeting. We're talking about, just to be clear here, I should say, this is when I talked about the paid advertising, right? This is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about, is you can actually go and you can say, well, I want people who've gone to these websites. So those could be websites that are, say, competitors, for instance. I'd like to show my ads to those people. Or it could even be something like what we often call triggers. So for instance, let's say your family's going to have a new baby. Most people start to look for certain products early on in the pregnancy and other products later on in the pregnancy. Well, somebody who's selling those products that are usually purchased later in the pregnancy, they may retarget people who've been to those products that are earlier on. So if people look for, let's say, a crib earlier on, but diapers later on, if you're a diaper company, you may want to retarget people who've been going to crib manufacturers and looking at cribs. So it just gives you an idea. There's some really powerful things that you can do here. Going to pause for a quick second. Anything? Are we good, Kristen?
We are quiet on the home front at the moment.
Okay, good. All right, let me talk briefly about the search engine stuff, and then we'll move over to social media. So organic search engine, that's called search engine optimization. You may have heard the term SEO. And when you pay, that's called SEM, or search engine marketing. So search engine optimization, basically a technique where to help you get better website ranking, you get higher up. You want to be on that first page when somebody goes to Google and looks for the keywords that would apply to your business. And it's fairly complex. There's like 900 different factors that go into it, but basically it gets down to your website content that you want it to be, your text, your blogs, your images, your videos, and even what's called the metadata should be really focused on your target audience. So again, if you know your target audience, then you can focus those things on your target audience. And you also want to focus on what's called long tail keywords, and that is words, a string of keywords that is very specific to what you do. So if you're selling sandals and everything's just about sandals, then you're competing with thousands of other people out there. But if you have, let's say, a very specific, unusual type of sandal that nobody else does, then you can put that in there. That's called a long tail keyword, and you're not competing with the whole world. You're just selling with those people who are selling those kinds of sandals, and that allows you to move up in the ranking. It's all about focus, focus, focus. For search engine marketing, just to kind of refresh just make sure you're aware of what that is. I'm not going to get into these in any detail. I'm sure you've seen when you go online and you go do a Google search, above the organic results, you actually get some advertisements. Those are called search campaigns. They're usually text-based searches. That's the most common. But there's another really important one that everybody should be taking advantage of, and that's called Google My Business. And that's where you are actually popping up if you ever do a search like hair salons near me, right? You get a list of them. First of all, there's an organic component to that. You can do that virtually for free on Google, but there also can do paid advertising on that as well to kind of put you to the top of the list. And then there's display and video campaigns. You can actually insert your ads directly into videos and or next to displays. And there's also, even for companies that have a larger range of products, what are called shopping campaigns, where you can actually, if you've ever gone and typed in microwave oven, right, and you see these little boxes with microwaves that are available with some information about them, the price, number of the rating, etc. So those are the kinds of things that that's called a shopping campaign. So the point here is that in search engine marketing, that there are a lot of different things that out there, not just maybe what you've used to using or used to seeing, which is the text ads. I will leave this for you to take a look at when you go back and look at the slides. But if I can leave you with 1 or 2 points, again, focus, focus, focus. That you don't want to be paying for people who are not your target customers. And that's not just the products or the services, but probably in many cases is the location as well. You don't want to, if you're offering if you have a hair salon in Providence, you don't want to be paying for somebody who's doing a search in Connecticut or Texas, right? So you want to be very focused from a location standpoint as well. And I'll leave the rest for later on and move on to the social media. And as I mentioned, there's social media optimization. That's where it's organic, right? You're not paying for it, but you're doing everything you can to optimize your social media without paying for advertising or promotion or enhanced outreach. And social media marketing, and that's where you're doing advertisements actually in social media or promoting your social media posts. And to do that, we'll talk about target audiences, industry, and demographics for each of the social media platforms. But let me take a quick break here and ask Kristen if we have any questions.
We do not. We have a quiet group today, Jeff.
Okay.
Or you're explaining everything exceptionally well.
Oh, I'm sure that's it. Okay. So let's look at some of the social media platforms out there. Again, I'm not going to go into every detail here, but I'll hit on some highlights. These are the best known broader social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, which is kind of funny. It's almost it's a hybrid between a search platform like Google and a social media. I've included it here, but you could argue that actually YouTube is most often accessed via search, not in a social media way. But rather than get into that discussion, I've just included it here, and Twitter. Now, there is some variation between them, and you should look at that, although I will say, because these are broad platforms that are trying to attract the largest possible audience, they actually have been converging rather than diverging in terms of what they have to offer. In other words, over time, they're getting more and more alike, not more and more different, okay? But just to give you some ideas, right? So Facebook tends to be a somewhat older crowd. It's certainly, if you're trying to reach an older crowd, Facebook would be the place to do it because there's a lot of people over 55 there. Whereas Instagram, for instance, as a younger crowd. There used to be some variation by gender, but that's pretty much disappeared at this point. Each of them has a slightly different kind of focus. Facebook is often is very relationship oriented, you know, people connecting with friends, that sort of thing. Whereas Instagram, for instance, is more about storytelling. You want to talk about your vacation or something like that. YouTube has a very strong educational personality to it. In other words, things like how-to videos are very popular there. And then Twitter is about sharing, or some people would say oversharing about what they're up to. And as you can see, the different industries tend to do a little bit better in each one of these. So for instance, if you're, fashion and beauty is probably better in Instagram and Facebook than it would be, for instance, in YouTube, right? You know, it's going to be I just want to say that there's no. It's not like very infrequently do you find that one platform is perfect for one or one industry is perfect for one platform and not good for others, but there is slight variation from one to the other that you can see there. Now, there are also some more focused social media platforms, and these are just 4 of them that I brought up. LinkedIn, Pinterest, TikTok, and Snapchat. And the reason I say they're more focused is because they, unlike the other ones I say are going after these huge audiences, these tend to be more focused on a more specific audience. So for instance, LinkedIn is all about business networking. It's what's called a B2B platform. Pinterest is sort of shopping and fashion. So it has a younger audience. It has a larger, not exclusively, but a larger female audience. TikTok, although this is changing, was very young oriented, but has started to get broader as time goes on, and has tended to be, was more entertaining, now is getting into other things like education and how-to kinds of stuff. And then Snapchat, which I probably know the least about, I haven't actually used it, younger female audience. And again, you can see here that they're depending on the personality, depending on what people are going for, depending on the industries and the kind of content that gets posted, there's some variation between them, and that will help you to pick the one that best fits your business. And we'll talk about that, an example of that a little later on. Now, I would also remind you, though, that just because those are the well-known social media platforms, there is also some very good online communities as well that I would definitely say you should consider. Ones like Nextdoor, Angie's List, or Home Advisor, TripAdvisor, or for that matter, any industry group or affiliate group that is that in the industry, for instance, that you're in. So for instance, if you are, let's say, providing a local service, a caregiver service, or landscaping or something like that, you might, something like Angie's List or Nextdoor might be an excellent place for you to be, because you can actually reach out to people in your community, in your neighborhood, and connect with them there. Very much targeted around the people that you want to reach, and at the same time listen in on what they're talking about, what they're looking for. And that's just one example, but you can imagine virtually any subset, any group of people that you're trying to target. If there is a group, that online platform or an online group, you certainly would be a very good place for you to be in terms of your online presence. Let's take a quick question and see how we're doing, both for time, Christian, and if there's any questions.
Doing great on time. No questions at the moment. I'll take this opportunity to just remind everybody the chat box is open. We're keeping an eye on it. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in there. If you send it to me personally, privately, and not to everyone, I'll still ask it. We just won't use your name. So please don't be shy.
So just as a reminder, we were talking about both social media, both from an organic and a paid standpoint. In other words, whether you're doing it organically or whether you're paying to do some promotion, you want to think carefully about the platform. And generally, you want to pick one or two platforms and focus on them. So for instance, let's say that you were to pick Instagram, for instance, which has, actually, let me go ahead and back up here a little bit. So let's say that, Instagram has one of the things about it is it's a very visually oriented platform. If you've been on it, you know what I mean. Both, it started off with still photos, it's now into videos. And if you were to decide, well, okay, I want to focus on that one because that seems like the best one for my audience, then you might have, let's say, for a younger audience, and then you might, for instance, have Facebook for a little bit older audience. And one of the nice things about Instagram and Facebook is that they're both owned by the same company, so you can actually post on one and automatically post it on the other one. But I would not, especially for a young business, try to be posting on, 4 or 5 or 6 of these different platforms, whether they're these or the other ones that I mentioned that are more community oriented. I would try to focus and do a few well, rather than try to cover too many different bases at once. So some best practices. First of all, generally what I would recommend is try to create a sense of community with your audience. Reach out to everybody you can think of who might be interested and invite them to follow you. Supporters, potential partners, employers, customers, and then give content that adds some value back to your customers. That's something that would be interesting to them to learn about your business, your products, your offering, etc. If you work at it, you can create a sense of community, especially when we're talking about, remember, we're talking not so much about transactional stuff here, but talking more about creating a brand, right? And I'll just give you an idea of one of the largest communities out there. An interesting one is actually run by the company that makes those small train sets, the ones that used to be under the Christmas tree at Christmas and runs around in a circle. Well, there's a whole community of people who, in their basement or somewhere else have created these really cool model railroad sets, right? Well, there's a company went out and started, creating a community in which their customers could talk, showing them all the new stuff, talking about different ways they can apply the stuff. Hobbyists, right, love that kind of stuff. And that's an example of a very strong online social community. Don't get me wrong, that's one of the largest in the world. I don't expect you to get to that level, but I wanted to give you an idea of what sort of the gold standard looks like. Don't be shy. One of the hardest things sometimes is to just get out there and do it. And don't be a perfectionist. That can stop you from getting out and getting started. People won't remember probably 6 months from now that you might have posted something that wasn't quite the way you would have liked it, or the picture wasn't as good as you would like. It's not a big deal. Try different formats, different ideas, different approaches. And one of the ways you can do that is something called layering, where you have like the same message, but you basically use different formats and venues, so that you might do, you've probably seen this, where you have like a an interesting thing you want to talk about, well, you maybe have a still photo about it that you post somewhere, and then somewhere else, or even on the same platform later on, you do a video as well. You're doing that, first of all, it doesn't hurt to repeat to a certain extent, as long as you can keep it interesting, but also that allows you to reconnect with people on multiple levels. Some people are looking at videos, some people are not. So having it come out in different ways is very helpful and allows you to reach a larger audience. Another good idea is to reuse content and tweak it by channel or audience. So for instance, let's say I mentioned the example of, say, Instagram and Facebook. You might have the same content on each, but you tweak it a little bit. So it's a little different on Instagram than it is on Facebook, depending on the audience. And there are actually, I think, some apps that can help you to do that. So where you sort of come up with it once and post multiple times across different channels. And then another thing that's becoming extremely popular is what's called live streaming. Once you get to the point where you're willing and able to start doing sort of online videos, a very popular thing there is back-end operations. So might be surprised how interested people are, for instance, in how, not just in your cookies, but how you bake those cookies, what ingredients go into those cookies, who's involved in making those cookies, how they get packaged. One of the craziest things I ever heard of is there's actually something where people actually go online and post videos where all they do is they open boxes and show what's inside the box, right? So people like that kind of stuff, and you know, it's a good opportunity to add to the things you're posting out there. Another important thing to think about is what's called your marketing funnel. You might see over here some odd initials here: tofu, mofu, bofu. That's top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. These are marketing terms that get thrown around. But the idea is you're going from capturing people's attention to nurturing the relationship, and then eventually a call to action and build loyalty. And the two things I would say, besides thinking about doing your social media posts with these things in mind, is remember that you look at it as a sales funnel, right? You look at it as, well, there's people here who just sort of know about us, but really haven't engaged, right? And then there are other people who've already bought something. But remember that it's also, from the customer's perspective, it's a customer journey. And the more you can look at it from the customer's perspective, the better chance you have that you'll be able to give them what they want across all different stages of that journey. So try as much as possible to think of your marketing funnel in terms of the customer journey. And one other comment, and this is where my rather lame attempt here to show drops of water coming out of the funnel, but that's what these are supposed to be. What happens, of course, is the top of the funnel is very big, very wide. You're reaching a very wide audience, and that gets smaller and smaller as you go down. And you want to think about, you know, are there things that I can do to see, you know, look to see where you're leaking going from one to the other, and see what you can do in terms of your activities that will help you move people from one stage to the other without sort of leaking away. Now, by the way, don't get me wrong, it is a funnel, right? You know, you're not going to get 100%. I've actually been in businesses where we've gone from top of funnel to middle of funnels, maybe sort of in the range of 5 to 6% only went from top of the funnel, middle funnel, and then maybe only about 7 or 8% went from middle to bottom. So don't expect this to be kind of a straight down thing. It's a very sharp curve, if you will. And but anything you can do, or I'm sorry, put another way, it's often very helpful to think in terms of what can I do, what can I offer people there that will help them go, keep them in the funnel versus leaking out of the funnel. All right, let's just talk a little bit about some examples. My cohort, Sarah Linker, contributed this, and she's been doing some of these seminars with me. And so, for instance, she used an example, a coffee house that's near her, and they are on Facebook. She points out that it's a huge network, of course, and so there's a lot of people out there. What you want to be doing is engaging people, educating people, entertaining them. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? By posting photos, engaging in conversations. And then there's some more sophisticated things like pages, groups, there's Facebook Live, stories, etc. I would, if this is something you want to get into, it's way more than what we can talk about, but there are both Facebook and other people who do seminars just on all the different Facebook offerings, the different ways that you can use Facebook that you can learn about. Again, getting back to this issue of paid versus organic. A lot of Facebook, and let's face it, this is the way they make their money, is sort of a pay to play thing, right? There, in other words, you want to promote it to a lot of people, you're going to have to pay something to Facebook to get it out there. So what some people do, and I'm not saying this is right for your business, remember back to the search engine stuff versus the social media, they may use the search engine as a way to try to expand their network, but then they use the social media as a way to nurture their network. In other words, once they have somebody who's interested, now they can get them in their social media network, and they can nurture those people. They can be sending them things. They get them as a follower. They can can create a sense of make them part of the community. And by the way, Facebook has now become, for those of you who attended the e-commerce session yesterday, Facebook has a very strong connection now between their front end social media platform and their e-commerce platform. Instagram, as I mentioned, also is actually also a Facebook platform. It is far and away the best one for posting photos and video sharings. It's all about the visuals, and it's a good place to do to be posting those sort of things, and also very helpful for reaching a somewhat younger audience. Again, so one way you can do that, as she's shown here, would be to post some candid photos, some interesting video content, and even like a coffee shop, as you can see there, has found a way to make their product interesting, to create a little bit of a sense of community with the group. And after all, a coffee shop does have a sense of community, because people will probably, it's not like they're just most of their customers are not just driving by like on the highway and stopping in on the way to somewhere else once in a long while. A lot of them may come for their morning coffee. They may have friends there, etc. So that's the kind of thing that you can create a community around. You might highlight some of your long-term customers, for instance, and talk about somebody who's been a customer for several years and what their favorite drink is, and that sort of thing. And there are a lot of new content formats as well: the feed, stories, the TV, and also, again, the back-end connection to shops. So don't have time to get into all these different platforms, but if you're interested in a platform, I would suggest you actually attend a seminar where they talk about all the different offerings that are within that platform to learn more about them. Twitter, frankly, probably not as well suited for most of the people on this call. It tends to be a very, reaching a very wide audience. You see it mostly with things like celebrities and politicians and things like that, who are trying to do very wideband one-to-many connections. If you are going this way, the one thing I would recommend is that tweets often get lost out there because there are so many of them. So I would definitely be repeating whatever you're tweeting on another channel like Facebook or Instagram, or even your website. One thing you can do if you decide to go that way, if you do want to try to get more of a sense of engagement, is by tagging people, which allows you to kind of more channel your message to specific individuals. And there are channeling capabilities now, but again, this is more of a broader network kind of thing. LinkedIn, a couple of things I would recommend there. Again, it's excellent for B2B networking. You have both a personal and a business platform. Posting on there. So in other words, if you want to have a posting for your business and a posting for yourself, and you should be encouraging all your employees to have their own postings on LinkedIn connected to your business posting as well, where you showcase the companies, etc. Same sort of thing. You want to share relevant content. People in LinkedIn tend to be interested more about things like industry news and information they can use to improve their careers or learn more about the business they're in. So that's the kind of content you want to do. One thing I would recommend, I've used both of these and they've been very successful, is there are premium accounts that allow you to do sort of more what's called social selling, where you're actually able to go out and reach people on a one-to-one basis based on your network and your connections. You can do a little bit of that with the basic one, but with the premium one, the premium account, you have a lot more ability to do networking. This is the kind of thing, by the way, for instance, that headhunters use. It's de rigueur in that industry, right? Because it allows them to reach out to a wide variety of people and connect with them. And that's the kind of thing you might want to consider. The other thing is you can get some very interesting, highly targeted advertising opportunities around virtually any aspect you can think of your audiences that your audience has. So any attribute. So I'll give you an example of what I did that I still think is kind of interesting. And that is, we had a competitor at one point who wasn't doing very well, wasn't really servicing their customers. I actually was able to find a LinkedIn group, user group of people who owned that product. And I started running ads specifically to people who owned my competitor's product. So it gives you an idea of how targeted you can be. And it can be anything like how long people work there, what department they're in, what their titles are, et cetera. So there's some really interesting and fairly low cost advertising. And by the way, with all of these, you have the ability to create daily and often, sort of weekly or monthly advertising limits, right? So it's not like you get in there and suddenly you find, you have a big advertising bill. You can set you set a budget, right? And so you can start off very, very small. I think the smallest I've ever done was maybe about, and I'm not saying you can't do less than this. I think the smallest I've ever done was like $6 or $7 a day, 5 days a week. So that would have been sort of something in the $30 to $35 a week kind of range. And by the way, notice I said 5 days a week. You also have the ability, for instance, to run your ads only during the weekdays and not on the weekends. There's those, it gets that specialized basically. All right, let me pause. And do we have enough time to go into our last thing here,
We've
Kristen?
got about 5 minutes left, Jeff.
Okay, great. So question I often get asked is, should I hire an outside firm? And like all these things, there's no pat answer. So I'll use an analogy. It's kind of like imagine that you wanted to put a back deck on your home, right? Well, you could do it yourself, or you could go out and hire somebody to do it, right? There's trade-offs, right? If you do it yourself, it is, more, might be more affordable. But if you get somebody outside to do it, you're getting knowledge, you're experience, they have specialized tools. And of course, you're buying somebody else's time, so allowing you to do work on, your whatever else you need to do, whether it's at home or in the case of if you're getting a social media, if you're getting an outside firm, to run the business. The other thing I would point out is that all this digital marketing is very dynamic. It's changing all the time. And an outside firm does have the benefit of that's their job to keep up with what's going on. So building a deck may, to use that analogy, may not have changed that much in the last 10 years, but I guarantee you, doing social media has changed a lot in the last 10 years. Some alternatives to think about is you could start with yourself and then hire a firm later on. You might also have internal resources, somebody within your company who's really good at social media, right? Or friends or family. There are also outsourcing platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, where you can find contractors. You have to be a little careful because you're maybe getting somebody you don't know who's an independent contractor, but that is something to consider. And if you're on any sort of platform like Shopify, for instance, those platforms do tend to have some added capabilities. They're adding capabilities to help you get good at social media, SEO, etc. And of course, talk about your marketing, think about your marketing strategy first. So summarize, strategize, execute, test, measure, adjust. Know who your target customers are, because everything else depends on that. Know what your differentiation is, because that's going to drive your message. That's going to tie with what you want to talk to people about, how you're different, how you're unique, what you have to offer. Set some goals and build your plan with phases in mind. You don't have to do everything right off the bat. Maybe start with brand awareness, then start thinking about link leads, then start thinking about sales. There are built-in monitoring and analytics techniques with all these platforms. You really do want to use them, because it's very hard to do the test, measure, and adjust unless you're monitoring and using the analytics. And one of the things we say in digital marketing is test everything. One of the wonderful things about all this online digital media is it gives you the ability to try different things and compare them, whether it's message, product, price, packaging, descriptions, keywords, anything that you want, you can change up and you can figure out what works best. And there's a thing called A/B testing. Even things like, okay, I'm going to do this ad in red, I'm going to do it in blue, and I'm going to do it in green, and see what kind of, whether I get a different reaction. And lo and behold, people react to the red one much more than the blue and green one. The nice thing about all this stuff is it gives you the ability to try different things and compare how they work. So definitely want to take advantage of that. Just a quick thanks. These are some links, by the way, to some of the content you've seen there. You can take a look at this when you get your slides. And I'll end it with, is there any questions at this point you want to answer before we wrap up, Kristen?
I don't see any in the chat. I will stick around for a little while after we conclude today. So if anything comes through, I'll certainly send them your way, Jeff.
Okay. Right.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I told everybody he was an expert. that was a lot, but it was really fantastic. And the slides, I think, will go a long way in helping people refresh their memory on all of the things that just sort of filtered through our brains today.
Well, I hope it
Tomorrow,
was useful, and thank you. I enjoyed being able to be here.
we really appreciate it. For the rest of you here, tomorrow is our last session. We're going to be talking about taxes, everybody's favorite topic, particularly about sales taxes and sales taxes in general here in Rhode Island, but also what to consider when you are involved in online sales in other states. What does that mean for you? What does it look like? It's going to be taking a deep dive with a qualified CPA who's going to be talking about all of that tomorrow. So I hope you can join us. Again, these recordings, these materials will all be coming your way. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to us with any questions. We'll be happy to pass them along as needed or answer them if we're able. And we hope we see you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.